Welcome to Routing for Success, the show where we interview today's top logistics professionals, giving them a platform to share their stories and best practices. Today, we are turning the tables a bit. Our guest for today's podcast interview is myself. I was recently talking with Dean McCuba of Crossroads Parcel Consulting. He was asking me questions about the truck leasing business, and he thought it would be interesting to come onto the podcast and interview me on my own podcast. In this episode, we talk about leasing and finance within the parcel industry. We compare and contrast the FedEx Ground and Amazon DSP contractor models. We discuss some trade-offs for leasing versus financing new trucks, some of the reasons why we're seeing increased demand for leases, regional bank failures and tightening of the credit markets, and more. I'm pleased to present this special episode of the Routing for Success podcast. So, Dean, it's good to see you back on the podcast again.
Ryan, thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to doing this, and I think we are going to have some fun here. Ryan, I think this is a great first question, is what exactly does AP Equipment Financing do, and what is your role with the company?
Okay, so AP Equipment Financing has been in business since 1998. We're in the business of, really at the heart of it, we lend money. That's what we do. So small to medium-sized businesses need to acquire equipment, and we provide them the money to do so. More than that, specifically for parcel delivery and fleet in general, we also provide procurement services. We really started financing a lot of trucks for FedEx Ground delivery contractors back in 2010. And at that time, coming out of the recession, we would pick up the phone and talk to a contractor and basically say, hey, you need to buy trucks. We would like to lend you the money to buy those trucks. And back then, that was enough to get business done, because coming out of the Great Recession, it was actually tough to obtain lending at all. And as we did that more, we started getting asked by FedEx Ground contractors more and more often, hey, it's great that you can provide me the money to buy these trucks, but where the heck do I find these things? Most of the FedEx Ground contractors use walk-in step vans with a Utilimaster or Morgan Olson body, and you can't just go down to your local Ford dealer and find one of those. It's a very specialized product. So we discovered that there was value in offering what's called procurement, which is basically, hey, if you commit to using us for the financing and the lending side, we will actually go and connect you with a seller for the specific truck that you need. And we have connections throughout the industry, so you can make sure that you're getting a good deal. So anyway, that's really blossomed. We're now one of, if not the number one lender for new trucks for FedEx Ground delivery contractors. We've got about 10 full-time account managers where that's all they do all day, every day, is work with FedEx Ground contractors to acquire and finance or lease vehicles for their fleet. I've been with the company since 2011. I started out in sales. I moved into sales management. I've held a variety of different roles over the years. Our company launched a brand new startup equipment distributor dealership a few years ago. It has nothing to do with the FedEx Ground or parcel delivery industry, but I ran that for a while as the company's president. Now my role is vice president of business development, which basically means that I look for new things for us to do. I spearhead new revenue opportunities, try to find new markets for us to get in, and just come up with new ideas in general, this podcast being one of them.
Ryan, back in the days when I was working in a sales and marketing position at FedEx with a focus on growing the FedEx Ground business, it would come up that there were specified manufacturers that provided a FedEx spec truck. And I'm assuming, I don't know how you secure those trucks, but can you explain to me just a little bit on how that works to make sure that when you offer a solution to one of your clients, that it meets FedEx spec?
Yeah, that's a good question. So FedEx does have a specific list of requirements for the trucks that they allow to be put into their system. And that's something that the FedEx Ground contractors can obtain. We simply asked, hey, could you send us that? Because we want to make sure we're getting you trucks that are within spec. So there's a specific shade of white that they like. There's other color things that they don't like. For example, they don't like having black wheels. That's a no-no for FedEx trucks. There's some more specific requirements with respect to the logo placement, which isn't super relevant anymore because now FedEx installs the logos for the contractors, but they didn't used to do that. Even more important than that, though, really the big ones are the trucks these days. They have to have a 3-camera system. So they need to have a backup camera so that you don't hit anything or reduces your chances of hitting something while you're backing up. And then also a camera on each blind spot so that when you're driving forward and you use your turn signal, the screen for the driver actually shows you what's in your blind spot. They're required to have collision sensors on both the upper and lower portion of the rear of the truck, again, just to mitigate accidents in reverse. And there's some other specific requirements too, but that's one of the advantages that we have, Dean, is we've been doing this for so long. We're intimately familiar with what those requirements are. There is some risk, especially for a brand new FedEx ground contractor who may not know all those little things, that they go out and they try to acquire a vehicle to deliver packages with, and then the terminal management says, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't meet our spec. You need to do this and that to it, which is a hassle.
I'm assuming that if a contractor ended up, for whatever reason, with a truck that wasn't spec'd correctly or didn't meet their minimum standards, that's going to be a problem for the contractor, correct?
Oh, it's a problem. Yeah, they're just simply not allowed to use it. So, for example, if they have a truck show up and they bring it to the terminal and they want to register it into the system to deliver packages with, the terminal manager, there's some inspection process that happens, and they may look at it and say, hey, your truck, it doesn't have a backup camera. We're not going to allow you to use this. You cannot register this on what's called the Schedule B. That's the place where FedEx ground contractors register all their full-time vehicles that they use. It won't be permitted to go onto the Schedule B. So that's problematic for sure.
Here we are talking about only FedEx. So obviously you have a focus with FedEx. Why is it? And are there opportunities out there for your company with other service providers that provide contracted pickup and delivery services?
Yeah, we do have a big focus on FedEx. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, we're one of, if not the largest lender and procurement provider for new trucks within FedEx. In the year 2021, we procured and financed or leased over 2,000 new trucks for FedEx ground contractors. Last year was just a shade under 2,000. So we're one of the bigger players. With that being said, part of my job is trying to find new markets for us to be in. We don't have any presence in many of these other parcel delivery markets. It's one of the reasons I like to talk to you, Dean, is because I get to learn about Amazon and DHL and all of these other players that are out there. And hopefully we're able to make an entrance into some of those markets and take the same services that we're providing now to FedEx ground contractors and provide those into other markets too.
Something that I see interesting happening just from driving around and being very familiar with where the FedEx Express terminals are in the Northeast, I am seeing more leased vehicles. And I think that has something to do with FedEx Express's slow transition of moving an employee pickup and delivery model to the ground pickup and delivery model. Right now, again, I'm just seeing a lot of new leased vehicles parked in these terminals across the Northeast. Is that business an opportunity for you where you're working with FedEx Express and leasing directly to them, or is that something you're really not interested in?
I would be interested in it, but I don't think Express would be interested in talking with me, to be completely candid. So I know that you're familiar with this, Dean, because you worked at FedEx, but for the listeners who don't know, FedEx is not just one division. So when you see a van driving down the road, if it says FedEx Express on the side versus FedEx Ground or FedEx Freight or FedEx Custom Critical, those are all separate, really separate companies that operate under the umbrella of FedEx Corporation. So FedEx Ground is fragmented. There's about 6,000 independent contractors or independent service providers across the country who have contracts with FedEx for a specific service area where they're responsible to bring their own trucks, their own employees, and deliver all of the packages within that service area. So it's very fragmented. That's 6,000 separate purchasers who we get to engage with and kind of woo over and negotiate terms with and help them in a very unique way for their business, because every one of these businesses is unique. FedEx Express division operates entirely different. So there's one guy. I'm sure that he has some support, but really, and I know the guy's name, but there's one person at FedEx Express who really makes the purchasing decisions for the entire fleet. I know that the FedEx ground fleet is, very, very loosely about 100,000 vehicles. I couldn't tell you what the Express fleet is. I don't remember exactly. It's it's smaller than that. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of purchasing power. And so they're negotiating huge deals for vehicles, and then also, how they choose to finance them or lease them, and any other added services too. So I've never had a seat at that table. I'm not sure that that's really the business that we're interested in. Our business is really geared more towards serving small to medium-sized businesses, operations that have an owner who's involved with the business and working, putting real hours in and trying to make decisions and run every aspect of that business. If we can go to them and save them their most valuable resource, which is their time, by offering procurement services and lease and finance. And we can also finance upwards of $1 million for one customer account. I mean, there's some customer accounts where we've financed $2 million of vehicles all in-house. We're not brokering that out to other places. So we really provide a good service for those smaller businesses. And I think that's where we want to live.
FedEx about a year ago announced a major operational transformation where they're going to merge pickup and delivery operations for express and ground into the existing ground contractor-based pickup and delivery model. Once this is done, it won't be called the FedEx ground contractor model anymore because they'll be picking everything up. It's an incredible challenge for FedEx to do this, and it's going to take another 2 to 3 years for them to merge all of those express terminals into the ground model. Are you hearing from your customers who are existing FedEx ground contractors that they see an opportunity for picking up more business, or are they lukewarm about the opportunity and sort of taking the position of show me first?
It really depends. So, on one end of the spectrum, I had a podcast interview with one of the largest FedEx ground contractors in the entire network. The guy has 220 routes. This was just from a few weeks ago. His name's Chad Carpenter. And prior to becoming a FedEx contractor, he's only been a contractor for about 5 years. He had a 24-year career at Express. So he's intimately familiar with how Express works. And he has a huge operation, 220 routes. He's not concerned about it at all. He sees it as an opportunity. It's more volume. He has a large network of vehicles, which this will be very easy for him to plug into. That's his perspective on things. I've spoken to some contractors who are in an area where they've diverted most or all of the express volume into their ground service area. And they say it's great. It's more volume. Yeah, there's some other adjustments that we have to make, but it hasn't been problematic and I'm making more money. And then there's another group of FedEx contractors who say it sucks. We don't operate on the same kind of time frames that Express does, where they have very strict pickup times. If you're an attorney's office and you've got an envelope that's got to make it to the courthouse by a specific time, you need it to get picked up on time. You need it loaded onto that airplane on time, and it's got to make it to its destination. Trying to figure that out has been problematic for some. I've had some FedEx contractors mention that they're not being compensated quite enough for it to be worth it. Just like anything else, I guess it depends. But we're still very early on. It's super limited. The contractors who have been in these areas, I think a lot of them have signed NDAs, so we're not getting the whole picture. And we'll see over the next few years how things shake out.
We haven't talked about Amazon, and you can't have a discussion about what we're talking about without interjecting Amazon because, they're just so big and dominant. I'm assuming you don't have a lot of the Amazon DSPs, which are a model similar to FedEx, but not exactly the same because Amazon leverages a lot more of their decision-making capabilities with their delivery service partner relationships or their contractor relationships. Does this have anything to do with, your situation with Amazon? Do they just not want to deal with or allow their DSPs or their contracts to go out there and find their own solutions?
They can go out and find their own solutions. So there's a few key differences between the Amazon DSP and the FedEx Ground independent service provider model. So in FedEx Ground, all of the territory for delivered packages, like 99% of the territory is taken. It's accounted for, and there's already a service provider who has that contract. So if you want to get into the business of delivering FedEx Ground packages, more likely than not, you're going to have to get into contact with one of the existing service providers and negotiate a purchase of their business. There's a big equity investment just for the rights to the contract that goes onto your balance sheet as blue sky. And really the goal for a lot of FedEx Ground contractors is to buy into a business, grow it over the years, improve the profitability, increase its scale, and then have some successful exit at some future time when you sell the rights to that service area to someone else. Amazon, with their DSP model, is fundamentally different in that their DSPs, they do not own the exclusive rights to any geographic territory. Their contracts are more like, hey, Dean, you show up with 30 vans and 30 drivers, and we'll tell you the night before how many we'll actually need to deploy the following day and where exactly they will be delivering. Might be a neighborhood over there, it might be a neighborhood over here. That allows Amazon to be very fluid with the way that they deploy their assets. But it has a big impact for the actual contractors themselves. You know, a FedEx ground contractor, they're going to be incentivized to purchase trucks because they're going to be in that territory for a longer period of time. They want to build some amount of equity value because a business that has an up-to-date fleet that is owned, even if it's financed, if there's some equity there, is a more valuable business than one that is just totally blue sky. And you want to prepare yourself for that successful exit. There's also some other nuances with the way that the business is valued, you know, where if you purchase and finance trucks, those are capitalized onto your balance sheet. So it does not hit your EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, which is really one of the key metrics for having a high business valuation is having high EBITDA. If you have a lease payment or a rental payment, that reduces the EBITDA, reduces the perceived value of the business. Amazon DSPs don't worry about any of that. There's no big capital outlay to get in. They have many areas where territories are available. And because there's no set contract and there's no hope for some big exit at the end, it's strictly just a cash flow thing. So they're more likely to lease. You know, they actually don't want to be locked in to a specific fleet. They would rather have rental or lease agreements. So anyway, that's some nuance between leasing and buying. Really, to answer your question though, Dean, another key difference is Amazon really flexes their muscles with their negotiating power on behalf of their Amazon contractors, the DSPs. So Amazon went to a big fleet management company. It's one of the largest fleet management companies that there is. And I don't know what the conversation looked like. It was probably something along the lines of, hey, we're Amazon. We have this huge network of delivery companies, but they're all under our umbrella. And we want to negotiate special terms for them leasing vans from you and getting them serviced and anything else that they might need. We will send lots of their business to you. And they have some sort of website or program that they plug into, and everything is right there under one roof. So I'm interested in working with Amazon DSPs. I think that there's a lot of business there. Most of the Amazon DSPs I've spoken with, though, they said like 90% of the van purchasing just goes through this, you know, fleet management company that Amazon has hooked them up with, and they get a pretty sweet deal through that program. But that doesn't exist at all in FedEx ground. FedEx is very hands-off, and they tell their service providers, get your trucks, get your financing and leasing from wherever you want. We're not going to have any say in it. We're going to be very hands-off.
You know, there's another group of parcel delivery and pickup service providers that are referred to as the regional carriers, like OnTrack. LaserShip merged with OnTrack. They don't go by LaserShip anymore, but that's a big one. LSO, Speedy. There's obviously a number of those regional carriers that are offering lower cost pickup and delivery services. They're not integrated carriers, so they can't do everything that a UPS and FedEx does. Are these folks an opportunity for you?
Yes. Yeah. And I just need to figure out how to get in touch with them and learn more about their business model too, so that we can make good credit decisions. But I mean, look, they're driving a van, they're picking up packages, they're delivering packages. That's the business that we're interested in being in.
You know, and I know we've talked about opportunities for you, and obviously that's important to everybody in business. So people are interested in business opportunities. But what I'm thinking about right now is this UPS relationship with Roadie. They own Roadie, and they are expanding Roadie's reach in terms of being an on-demand pickup and delivery company. And UPS has done a great job working with the franchise owners at the UPS store. And so they're very much used to working with outside suppliers. Also, something very interesting, during the recent Teamsters negotiations and settlement, Roadie did not come into play. So they have a little bit of flexibility in potentially moving certain types of low volume, low revenue business potentially to the Roadie part of the business. I'm just speculating that maybe this is a longer term opportunity for you to get in front of UPS's face and say, hey, this is what we can do through you to potentially offer these drivers a truck opportunity versus delivering in their own personal vehicle. You have any thoughts on that?
I do, yeah. And not just for Roadie and UPS specifically, but really everywhere in general. I mean, look, like usage for assets is getting shorter and shorter time frame. I mean, we're really turning into kind of a lease and rental type society. And not just with vehicles, but with like everything. You know, it's like my grandfather, he bought his pickup truck and he bought it with cash and he drove the thing for 30 years. And then my parents would buy cars and pay them, finance them and pay them off and keep them for 10 years. Now my parents lease a car, you know, and they want to lease a car for every 2 or 3 years and trade it in. And we're seeing the same trend in business. I could tell you in FedEx, even in the short time that I've been involved since 2011, so about 12 years now, back then, typical FedEx contractor had 2 or 3 trucks. They were 20-year-old Freightliner diesel step vans with like duct tape and screws and the whole thing, and they're wrenching on it every single day. Now it's a completely different customer profile. Now we're working with FedEx contractors who have 20, 30, 50 routes, and they're more business-minded Excel spreadsheet type guys. And they see the value in, you know, at a minimum, buying a new truck every 5 or 6 years and getting that depreciation benefit for their tax expense, and then also getting rid of the truck before it has serious problems. But we're starting to see demand for even shorter leases than that. You know, we recently launched a lease program where you lease a truck for 3 years and then trade it in at the end. And we've seen that start to ramp up and demand increase for that. I think that there's big opportunities for parcel delivery with rental. All of these companies, UPS and Roadie included, but FedEx and Amazon and all of the rest, you know, we're about to head into the peak holiday season. We're having this conversation, Dean, in October. All of these companies, they get super, super busy right after Thanksgiving. I mean, you get Thanksgiving and then you have Black Monday and all the online ordering, all the shopping malls and stores, they need to stock up. So all of that stock has to get delivered to their stores, and then all of the home delivery e-commerce aspect as well. There's a tremendous amount of demand for rentals. You know, I wouldn't be surprised, Dean, you talked about how you were seeing a lot of leased or rented delivery vehicles. That could just be seasonal. Try going and renting a budget truck in the month of November, and you'll probably just get told, sorry, we don't have anything, because all of these companies, UPS, you know, Amazon, FedEx, they're going and sucking all those up as early as August. They have to secure the rentals, and they don't need them in August, but they know that if they wait until December, that there just won't be any available. So these are a lot of the things that I'm thinking about.
You're absolutely correct. When I was at FedEx, they would start seriously shopping for their peak season vehicle needs in June. And then they've got to have the deal done by August, like you said.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of value there. I mean, delivering packages out of a budget, you know, box truck, it sucks. It really sucks. Like it takes on average twice as long to make a stop, because you've got to get around into the street, by the way. So you open your door, you're stepping out into traffic, which is dangerous in of itself, but then you have to walk all the way around the vehicle, roll up that back door, kind of, you know, do a little mini muscle up to get yourself into the back of the truck, find the package out the back, hop up there, pull that door down. Whereas, you know, a properly designed parcel delivery vehicle, the driver is getting up from their seat, turning to their right through a bulkhead door, grabbing the package and exiting through the stairs on the right, on the curb side of the truck. It's safer, but it also takes about half the time. And there's just not a lot of places renting or doing short-term leases for this proper delivery type vehicles. And I feel like there's opportunity there.
And we can end this part of the discussion after this point I want to make, but it's ironic that this came to me in the past week, just prior to our call here. I read some statistics last week about what it costs right now, given the increased interest rates, what the average cost for purchasing a new vehicle, a car, for a consumer is, and what the average amount that they finance. The average consumer today is financing $40,000 per vehicle, which to me is a stunning amount. And the average monthly payment is over $700. So some of that has got to be translating over to the business side of things. And you can see the lower cost opportunities with leasing versus purchasing. I have that right, don't I?
It all depends on the business. A step van costs, call it $65,000 for like a Ford F-59 Utilimaster step van. Some companies just cut a check, say, yeah, I'll buy it. Other companies, they don't have the capital to do that. They need to come up with some other solution to finance it. And the monthly payment for financing a truck on a 72-month term, it is a lot higher today than it was 4 or 5 years ago. And that's not just my company, that's all companies, just because the cost of funds have gone up. And that's definitely contributing, I think, to some of the increase in demand for, hey, look, maybe I never considered doing like a 3-year lease where I upgrade the truck every 3 years and turn it back in. But man, if you can get my monthly payment down lower than what it would be to purchase and finance that truck, then there's a conversation there, because saving a couple $100s per month per route, that can make a big difference for a lot of these operators in today's environment.
Obviously, there's a world of change going on in the industry, and you're in the middle of it. And clearly, to me, it makes sense to be able to talk to someone like yourself and get a better understanding of which direction to go, leasing or ownership. We already know, because you've mentioned it, we've talked about it, that the cost lend themselves towards leasing. What are some of the other conditions that might lend themselves to leasing versus owning outside of the cost of the vehicle?
Yeah, so outside of the cost of the vehicle, one of them is added services. So oftentimes, if you buy a vehicle, you buy it, it's yours. It's up to you to figure out how to take care of it. There are leasing solutions out there that say, hey, if you're leasing this vehicle from us for a relatively short time frame, not only are we providing the vehicle to you, but we'll also provide you a way to service it. So you can bring it into our location, or we'll have a mobile service truck come out to you and service it. So the 3-year step van lease program that we launched last year, that's basically what it is. So our FedEx contractors who sign up for that specific program, they can get a new step van delivered to them. And for the preventative maintenance, it's all handled just by a mobile service truck. It comes right out to the FedEx terminal and services the vehicle right there on site. So it saves them some time, and it also just reduces their total preventative maintenance cost. So it's a win-win there. Some other things that go into it, Dean, again, like FedEx ground contractors versus Amazon. Amazon really likes leasing because they don't have a fixed contract, for a specific area. They want to, when the day comes that they want to get out of the business, it's a heck of a lot easier to get out of the business if you have a fleet of leased vehicles. You can reassign those leases to, if there's a new operator coming into your territory, or, if worse comes to worse, you can, redeploy them to multiple other companies. That's much easier to do than if you own the assets themselves. So are you in a business where you need to have kind of some fluidity and options with how you deploy the assets or flex up or down the size of your fleet? If you are, then leasing could definitely make more sense.
There's been a lot of turmoil in the regional banking industry, and a lot of consumer loans for automobiles go through that part of the industry. And I'm curious as to, has this impacted you, and do you operate a little bit differently than some of your competitors, in that do you take on some of the capabilities and characteristics of a bank, of a direct lender, or are you just arranging the financing and finding the financing for your customers?
Yeah, so without getting too esoteric with the verbiage here, in lending, there's what's called a broker. If you're working with a broker, they don't actually provide any money themselves for the lending. Instead, they learn about your business, and then they say, okay, I have relationships with lenders. I'm going to pick the lender. It's kind of like being in the F&I department at a car dealership, right? You buy your car and you go into the back room and they say, well, I can get you Toyota Motor Credit, or I can get you this bank over here, or this credit union over here, and I'm going to send you to wherever I want to be. That's the broker type model. That's not what we do. So my company, AP Equipment Financing, we are what's called a direct lender, or an independent finance company. So we actually provide the money ourselves. Now, how do we do that? Of course, behind the scenes, we have various ways that we raise money. We're very fortunate, Dean. We're owned by a huge Japanese conglomerate company called Tokyo Century Corporation. They're publicly traded on the Japanese stock exchange. They have something like $50 billion US of assets on their balance sheet. I think the company is like a $5 billion market cap company. So we have access to capital. Beyond that, when we finance vehicles for FedEx Contract or any of the other industries that we're involved with, I'd mentioned previously that we can finance $1 million, $2 million for a single customer account, and it's all in-house and it's all with our company. So they log into our website and it's all right there. One of the reasons we can do that without taking on too much risk is we do have a process behind the scenes for syndicating out the cash flows for those transactions. So we do have a network of banks and other buyers that we work with, where we pool together the transactions that we put together, and we have these other companies buy the deals, but we retain all the servicing in-house. So it's not like a mortgage where you get your mortgage and then a month later you get a letter saying, hey, I know that you were working with Wells Fargo, but now you're working with some other company that you've never heard of before because your mortgage got sold. It's not like that at all. Our customers never hear about it. They never see it. They work with our company if they need to communicate with customer service, if there's a problem with a payment, if they want to make additional payments, anything like that, they're still working with our company. It's really given us an advantage in a few ways. I mean, number one, when a customer works with you, they want to work with you. When they work with AP, they want to work with AP. They don't want to have to start some relationship with some other lender out there. So we allow them to do that while still having very high approval amounts, $1 million, $2 million per account. The other way that it's benefited us, you talked about the turmoil in the banking industry. We saw Silicon Valley Bank and some other kind of smaller regional banks have significant problems. And I don't know that it's really hit Main Street yet, but there are some significant impacts going through the banking sector right now. And credit and lending is tightening. So we're seeing a lot of competitors out there who, we used to have a real hard time competing against them. We're not having a hard time competing against them now because all of a sudden they've had to increase their rates to offset some of the losses and other problems that they're having that may not even be related to the specific industry. Maybe they lend to FedEx contractors and that's doing great, but they also lend to a bunch of other things too, and those aren't doing great. So they have to raise their pricing for everybody. We've seen a lot of credit unions and a lot of other lenders, reduce their total amount that they can approve for a single customer. They used to be able to do 500,000, $1 million. Now they're only doing 200,000. So maybe they can do a couple few trucks and then that person has to go find another place to work with. So there's a lot of turmoil in lending right now, Dean, but we're incredibly lucky just being owned by a very large company who's financially robust and willing to invest in this business to help us be successful.
After having this discussion with you, and I've known you for a little while now, I do better understand the overall value proposition for AP equipment financing. And for me, if I was to unretire and decide that I wanted to become a contractor, I don't think that's going to happen, but anything can happen, right? I wouldn't know how to get started with the leasing process. It almost sounds like your organization is one stop for someone in the business and that you can walk through because what I'm seeing people with no experience in pickup and delivery buying FedEx ground routes. And so they've got a lot to learn. I'm assuming that part of your value proposition is that you can maybe hold their hand a little bit through the truck leasing aspect of the process.
That's absolutely our value proposition. Whenever you get into any of these businesses, FedEx Ground, but also the other ones too, there's a lot that you have to learn. You have to learn, really the biggest one, the toughest one is driver recruitment and retention. These drivers don't make a lot of money and it is a constant churn. So how are you advertising to attract talent? What is your interview process? How do you screen out the drivers who may be problematic and get in accidents and expose your company to serious downsides? You've really got to be on your game for the driver side. There's other pillars of the business too. Operational efficiency. Are you delivering the packages when you're supposed to? Are you not getting any customer complaints? There's relations with FedEx, corporate. Do you have a good relationship with your senior manager? Because if you don't, that could cause you problems down the road. There's all these things that you have to learn. Trucks is a big one. I've heard a lot of people say, look, the business is delivering packages. It's people and trucks, and you've got to have a solid strategy for each of those things. We take some of that work, not all of it. You still have to understand your business and have a good strategy. We save people time, and we definitely handhold. So I guess just as an example, if there's someone getting into the business, they're just becoming a brand new FedEx Ground contractor, we can offer them some guidance on the different styles of vehicle that are available depending on the different style of route. Is it rural? Is it in the city? Is it higher mileage? Is it higher stop count? Are you doing any off-roading, etc.? We have relationships with all of the dealers for those vehicles. So right now, today, there are about 6,000 FedEx Ground spec step vans built and available for sale from about 30 different Ford dealerships. So if you're starting in this business, you can try to figure out who those 30 Ford dealerships are, try to learn what they have available, and negotiate deals to find the best price. Or you can just work with us because you say, hey, I need a Ford F59 P1000. Cool. We know everybody who has those. We know who has them at the very lowest price today. We will handle all the paperwork. You don't even have to talk with them. We'll get it delivered to your facility, and we'll set you up with a finance or lease option that works for your business too. So hand-holding isn't the word that I used. You used it, but yeah, that's very much what we do.
Ryan, I have sort of a quirky question for you. As I've been driving around for the 40 years that I've been in this business, I see writing on the sides of trucks, must have something to do with government certification. And where I am in New York State, I see a lot of drivers have their trucks registered out of state. Is this common? And can you explain to me why that occurrence might be happening?
Tax. That's why it's happening. So when you operate a business in a state, particular state, let's say you're in California. California has, the area that I'm from, I was born in the East San Francisco Bay Area in California. They have 9.75% sales tax. So if you're a business operating and you purchase a truck, you're going to pay 9.75% sales tax on top of having to register the vehicle. Now, if you are a business that is a for-hire interstate transporter, then you do not have to pay that sales tax because you have trucks engaged in interstate commerce going across state lines. You might be based in California as an example, but your trucks are going to be all over the place, accruing mileage in many different states. So there's a system, a federal system, where you get apportioned license plates. So all over the road trucks that you see, big semi truck hauling a trailer, they're going to have apportioned federal plates. So they don't have to pay sales tax. They have other ways that they get taxed. So it could be that. The other thing that it could be is there are some states, Ohio and Illinois are kind of notorious for this, that have what's called rolling stock tax exemptions. That basically say, if you are based in our state and you need to acquire a vehicle, and either you or the company that you are leasing it to is a registered for-hire interstate transporter, then you do not have to pay sales tax. You'll register it in the state of Ohio or in the state of Illinois. You'll have an Ohio or Illinois plate, and you just don't have to pay sales tax on it. So, you could kind of see where this is going. What a lot of companies will do, Dean, is they'll set up a company within the state of Ohio or Illinois, maybe register it to a PO box, something like that. And that is the company that they will use to purchase all of their vehicles. And then they'll register them in that state, even if they're not based there. And then they will lease the vehicles back to their company. Now, FedEx Ground contractors, they don't operate under their own authority. They operate under the FedEx Ground DOT number, which is a for-hire interstate company. And the way that the FedEx contract reads, it's basically a lease agreement. FedEx is leasing the use of your assets to deliver the packages. So you'll see Ohio license plates all over the country, all over. A truck, a step van with an Ohio license plate driving around in California or New York, where you're from, would New York like to get the sales tax for that? Probably. But I mean, realistically, if a highway patrol officer pulls over a truck and it says FedEx Ground on the side and it's got the DOT number and it's got an Ohio plate on it, and they ask about it, and the driver says, I don't know, it's a rental, are they really going to end up in trouble with the state of New York? I don't think so. I'm not an attorney. This is not legal advice, so don't take it to the bank. But there's a lot of operators that do that, and we're seeing it more and more often for operators to reduce their expenses.
We've talked a lot about leasing vehicles, but how hard is it to give a vehicle back when it's leased?
That depends. So leasing is super broad. You have on one end of the spectrum what we call like a finance lease. If you do a lease agreement where at the end it has some sort of nominal purchase option like $1, hey, you're going to lease this vehicle, and then at the end you pay us $1 and it's yours, you own it. That is not recognized by the IRS or by GAAP accounting. It's not recognized truly as a lease. Technically, yeah, maybe it's a lease because, you don't own the asset, you're leasing it. But really for, the substance, that's really just a financing agreement. And it's your asset, so you wouldn't return that vehicle. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're renting something for like a week, super easy to return. And everything in between. Typically, the shorter the usage period, the easier it is to just return an asset and kind of walk away from it. That isn't to say that you could set up like a walk-away lease on a 5 or a 6 year. But, if you're going to make payments on a vehicle for 5 or 6 years, it probably makes sense to own it in those cases. I can tell you for us, so going back to the 3-year lease program that we have for the FedEx ground contractors on the step vans, they lease it for 3 years. They make their payments. We provide preventative maintenance services using mobile service trucks. And then at the end of the 3 years, we pick a location within 25 miles of where they are. They drop off the truck, hand over the keys, and as long as there isn't any damage to it, they get their full security deposit back, and they're done. They're done at that point. It's very easy.
Okay, so that is relatively simple. And then you also mentioned that sometimes there's terms and conditions in a lease that allow a contractor to reassign it to somebody else, correct?
It depends on the lease. Yeah. Now, we don't like that. If we have a company who wants to lease 10 vehicles from us for a period of 3 years, our intention is to work with that company. So right. We don't like it. But, more often than not, Dean, if we end up in a situation where they need to try to reassign these vehicles to another company, it's probably because they're going out of business. It's not a good situation. None of the companies that we work with go into a lease thinking, I know it's a 3-year term, but I'm really only going to use the thing for a year and then I'm going to try to get rid of it. That's not the intention. It's, either they lost their contract with whatever provider that they work with, FedEx, Amazon, or whoever it is. So it's usually not a good situation. It does make it easier to reassign a lease contract instead of one where, there's actually a registered owner on the title and you have to transact a sale, which can initiate sales tax in many cases. So leases are easier to reassign.
So there's almost a little bit of a personal aspect to this because you want to get to know that individual a little bit beyond their credit history and references and things like that. They can easily reassign. You just really don't know what kind of person these vehicles are going to end up with, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So at any time, I think everybody listening to this podcast has probably applied for credit at one point or another in their lives. So here's the crash course. If you're going to be in the business of lending money, there's really 3 things that we look at. There's ability, stability, and willingness to pay. So what do those mean? Ability is, do they have, if we lend them money for this and we give them a monthly payment, call it $1,000 a month, do they have the ability to pay that today? So that looks at things like how much money do they have in their bank account? Or is their business generating enough cash flow to make this payment? Do they have the ability to pay it? The next one is stability, which is, okay, they may have the ability to pay it today, but what's the likelihood they're going to continue to have that ability tomorrow and next month and next year and 2 years, 3 years from now? And you gauge that stability by things like how long have they been in business? A business that's been around and doing this for 15 years has a much better repayment rate than a company that's only been doing it for a year, just as one example. And then the last one is willingness to pay. And this one is much harder to gauge. Have they ever been convicted of a felony? Particularly things like fraud. Are there other indicators that say, even if they're able and they're stable, have they demonstrated in the past that they may just give you the finger and not want to pay? They've gone through bankruptcy, something like that before. So those are generally the things that we have to look at every single time. Luckily, we do this so much. We have a very efficient process. We can intake an initial credit application and we can have the transaction finalized, document signed, credit approval, the whole thing done that very same day in some cases. So we're pretty quick going through all that process. But those are generally the things that we have to look at when we're working with a customer.
Ryan, we're up to our last question here. I think it's gone great so far. I want to thank you for your open and honest opinions on your industry and your company. But this last question is about e-commerce. The growth of e-commerce is driving tremendous change in the parcel delivery space. How is AP Equipment Leasing changing to capitalize on changes in the industry? What do you see your company having to adapt to moving forward, given all the change?
Yeah, I mean, we've always adapted. I talked about our history where initially all we did was lend money. And then we figured out that we actually needed to expand our services and offer procurement. So we went from just lending money to saying, hey, we'll actually provide you with the vehicle in addition to lending you the money. We've already talked about how we're seeing trends go from purchasing and long-term usage of assets to shorter and shorter usage of assets. And we're evolving our product offerings to do more leasing and things like that. Today, what I'm thinking about now, Dean, is we're seeing a big rise from fleet management companies. Now, fleet management companies really are leasing and finance companies like mine, but they also offer a suite of other services too. So I'm talking about things like offering a fuel card or offering preventative maintenance plans, having a software solution where you can log in and see all the GPS tracking and do total cost of ownership analysis, because the fuel card and your lease payment and everything else all feeds into one place so that you have a kind of a bird's eye view of your entire fleet operation. That's what I'm thinking about now. We're seeing a tremendous amount of demand for that sort of thing. Dean, earlier I talked about how one of the positions I've had with our company was we started a chain of equipment dealerships. And this was for arborists, so tree care and light construction equipment. We opened 6 physical locations, got up to 40 employees, $40 million in annual sales by the time I handed off the reins and did something else. I had about a fleet of 30 pickup trucks that our salespeople used and our service shops used. I can tell you firsthand, I had no strategy at all for managing the preventative maintenance. The only way I knew that the registration was expired on one of those vehicles was when the employee called me and said, hey, Ryan, I just realized that the registration is 3 months expired. You want me to go take care of that? Or, hey, I see the little sticker on the window. I was supposed to get an oil change 1,000 miles ago. You want me to go take care of that? And that's how most small businesses operate, is they don't have a strategy for managing their fleets. So we're looking at software. We're looking at integrating fuel cards, preventative maintenance plans, and really being able to offer a whole holistic approach for small fleets.
Ryan, I'm going to throw something out there and put you on the spot because, as you know, I love doing that. For our next chat, I would like to talk about EVs in the parcel delivery industry, because I'm seeing a lot more negative stuff online. And, well, I guess it could be incorrect, right? But seriously, I'm seeing a lot more concerns about EV usage in general for automobiles. And I don't necessarily think that the same conditions apply on the parcel pickup and delivery side. So if you're up to it in a few weeks, I'd love to have a chat with you about EVs in the parcel pickup and delivery space and some of the barriers to success and opportunities.
Dean, let's do it. Always happy to have you on the podcast. And this was definitely a lot of fun, having the tables turned a little bit. Routing for Success is brought to you by AP Equipment Financing. In today's competitive market, it is essential to acquire the right trucks at a fair price and finance them in a way that makes sense for your business. Leveraging their extensive network of truck and van suppliers, the experts at AP Equipment Financing will help you locate the best deals on step vans, cutaways, panel vans, and more. Deliver them straight to your facility and finance them with low monthly installment options. Click the link in the description or visit apfinancing.com for more information. Routing for Success is an independent production of AP Equipment Financing and is in no way affiliated with or endorsed by FedEx Corporation, FedEx Ground, Amazon, or any other logistics company discussed herein. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Routing for Success.